Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindi newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindi newspaper dated 4th November 2020. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. Now, after looking at the important articles that we are going to discuss today, let us look at the important takeaways from this discussion. So in this article on page number 6, which is related to the divestment in the fossil fuel industry, the first takeaway will be what is divestment. Second is what are the arguments in favor of divestment from the fossil fuel industry. Thirdly, what is the current status of divestment. Then there is a data point on page number 7 and it talks about the comparison of governance in the Indian states, and it is based on an index which is released by an NGO. So we will look at that. And that index is known as Public Affairs Index. Then the third important article is on page number 14, and under which we will first look at the types of questions from the external trade that are asked in the preliminary examination. And after that, we will have a look at composition of merchandise exports, top 5 export destinations, top 5 articles of imports, and top 5 exporters to India. And after that, in the article on page number 7, which is related to the academic freedom, we will look at the status of academic freedom in India and also the factors that are hampering academic freedom in India. And after that, we will look at how the new education policy of 2020 is helping in promoting academic freedom in India. Also, you should take up this self-assessment test, and the answers for this are given at the end of this discussion. So let us start with the first article now. Now, this article on page number 6 highlights the important role that is being played by the divestment movement in checking the funding of the fossil fuel industry, which is responsible for the carbon emissions. So in this background, let us try and understand what is meant by the term divestment and what is the status of investment in the fossil fuel industry presently. So this can be an important aspect for us from General Studies paper 3 point of view under the topic environment, because this is one of the measures which aims at reducing the carbon emissions by cutting the investment in the fossil fuel industry. So first thing that we need to learn here is that what is divestment? So divestment is simply the opposite of the term investment, and it simply means getting rid of the stocks, bonds or investment funds that are unethical or morally ambiguous. So this article is related to the divestment in the fossil fuel industry. And accordingly, the global movement for fossil fuel divestment is asking institutions who invest to move their money out of oil, coal, and gas companies for both moral as well as financial reasons. Now, the fossil fuel industry is one of the biggest contributor to the carbon in the atmosphere. And accordingly, this global movement for fossil fuel divestment is asking institutions to reduce their investment in the industry of fossil fuel, that is the oil, coal, gas companies, etc. Now, which are these institutions who are spearheading the movement against the fossil fuel investment? So these includes various university, religious institutions, pension funds, local authorities, as well as charitable foundations. So an important thing that needs to be learned here is that the divestment is not necessarily related to divestment from the fossil fuel industry. And such kind of divestment campaigns have already targeted the tobacco industry, gambling industry, and companies which were funding the violence in Darfur in Sudan. And divestment movement also played a very important role in fighting against the apartheid regime in South Africa, which was accused of racism. So this is all you need to learn about the divestment movement against the fossil fuel industry. Now after this, let us look at what are the arguments in favor of divestment from the fossil fuel industry. So two kinds of arguments have been forwarded for divestment from the fossil fuel industry. First is the moral argument and second is the financial argument. The moral argument aims at reducing the global carbon emissions. And this is based on scientific research and is based on the targets for limiting the global warming to a 2 degree centigrade rise. And this is one of the targets under the Paris deal. So in order to prevent the catastrophic levels of climate change, it is argued that between 2/3 to 4/5 of the fossil fuel needs to remain in ground, that is, it should not be extracted from the ground. And this can be done by reducing the investment in the fossil fuel industry. And this exactly is the aim of the divestment movement, which aims at reducing the investment in the fossil fuel industry so that no more extraction of the fossil fuel is done, and which will ultimately lead to reduction in the atmospheric carbon. However, the fossil fuel companies still aim at attracting the investment because the target of reducing the global warming are not being met. And that is why these fossil fuel companies are still extracting reserves and selling them, and are also actively prospecting more sites for the extraction of fossil fuel from the ground. However, the issue here is that by doing this, they are leading the humanity on the path to irreversible climate change that can cause rising sea level, flooding, droughts, rising disease, increased conflicts, and refugee crisis. So, this is the moral argument for stopping the investments in the fossil fuel industry. The second argument against investment in the fossil fuel industry arises from the financial argument, and it rests on the premise that if international agreements on climate change are met, the investments that are done by the investing companies will become worthless. And why would it be so? And it will be because the targets under the Paris Climate Deal can only be met if the world adopts greener options of energy, which include the renewable energy. And accordingly, the consumption of coal, oil, and gas will be reduced drastically, and accordingly, the investments in these industries will become worthless. And in such a scenario, the investments that are done in the fossil fuel industries will be treated as stranded assets, and which could lead to another global economic crisis. So, the two arguments in favor of divestment from the fossil fuel industry are the moral argument, and second is the financial argument. However, the author says that such divestment appeals have not been applied much in India because of its lesser contribution to the carbon emissions. And that is because the CO2 per capita emitted by India is very low as compared to other developed and developing nations like China. However, the author cautions that India needs to be aware of the falling renewable energy prices and accordingly start divesting from the fossil fuel industry. And for that, we will have to chart our own path of divesting from the fossil fuel industry without much disruption in this industry. Now, after this, let us look at the current status of divestment. So, according to author, as of 2019, it is estimated that more than $11 trillion in assets have been committed to divestment from the fossil fuels industry. So, this is a huge improvement because of this movement against investments in the fossil fuel industry. However, a cause of concern here is that global banks are still continuing to finance the fossil fuel industry with investments to the tune of $2.7 trillion. And majority of the United States banks, some of the EU banks as well as Chinese banks are investing heavily in the fossil fuel industry. And a total of about $975 billion was the bank finance for 100 key oil and gas and coal companies between 2016 and 2019, which shows that it is also a huge amount that is still being financed by the banking sector. So although large amount is being committed for divestment from the fossil fuel sector, still lot of banks are investing or financing the fossil fuel industry, which is a cause of concern. And regarding the impact of the divestment movement, according to a recent report of the Climate Related Market Risks Subcommittee, which is a body under the Commodities Future Trading Commission, which is an independent agency of the US government similar to the Securities and Exchange Board of India, has said that climate change poses a major risk to the stability of the US financial system. So this shows that investment in the fossil fuel industry are not going to be viable in the future, and that can severely impact the stability of the US financial system because presently majority of the banks are investing or financing heavily the fossil fuel industry. And various companies which are facing issues of financing due to such kind of movements say that the divestment movement is making it difficult for them to raise capital. And one of the biggest company that has been adversely impacted is the Shell. So in this article, we have learned what is meant by divestment, what are the arguments for divestment, and also what is the current status of divestment from the fossil fuel industry. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this data point on page number 7 throws light on the state of governance in the Indian states. And this is based on an index which is known as the Public Affairs Index, which is published by the Public Affairs Center, which is an NGO. Now, some of the observations of the Public Affairs Index of 2020 can be very important in writing answers in the mains examination of General Studies paper 2 in the governance section. So you can use the observations of the Public Affairs Index in these answers related to the governance. So first let us understand what is this Public Affairs Index, and after that let us understand the observations of the 2020 Public Affairs Index. So the Public Affairs Center, which is a non-governmental organization, has developed the Public Affairs Index, and it is a unique statistical tool to evaluate the performance of the governance in the Indian states. Further, one important thing that needs to be noted about the Public Affairs Index is that it is largely based on secondary data. That is, it does not collect the data on its own. And it is based on the secondary data which is extracted from the union government ministries as well as departments. Further, this index measures the quality of governance at the state and the union territory level on three dimensions. These are the equity, growth, and the sustainability. And they use 50 indicators amongst themselves. And on all these parameters of equity, growth, and sustainability, Kerala is the best governed state according to the 2019 Public Affairs Index, while Uttar Pradesh is the worst performing state in this Public Affairs Index of 2019. Now, regarding this equity index, which is a subpart of the Public Affairs Index, it is computed using 23 social, economic, and gender related indicators. And these include malnutrition, women in legislature, slum population, and crimes against scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So, as you can see here, amongst the largest state on equity parameter, the Andhra Pradesh and the Kerala are the top, and the Uttar Pradesh is the worst performing state. However, under the smaller states, Meghalaya is the first, while the Delhi is on the last number. On the growth parameter, which is computed using 20 indicators which include the expense on agriculture, student to teacher ratio, drinking water, sanitation, electricity, etc., Kerala is again the best performing state, while Uttar Pradesh is the last. And among small states, on the growth parameter, Goa is the leading state, while Manipur is on the last number. In the sustainability index, which is based on the use of renewable energy, land degradation, waste management, and air quality, Kerala again tops, while West Bengal is on the last number. And as far as the small states are concerned, Goa is on the top and Uttarakhand is on the last number in this sustainability index. And overall, when these three parameters are clubbed, Kerala is the best performing state, while Uttar Pradesh has performed poorly in this index. So you can see the overall position in the map that is given here. And in this, it can be seen that the southern states have performed well as compared to the northern states. And under the union territories, Chandigarh is the best performing union territory. So the observations that have been provided under this Public Affairs Index based on the three sub-indices, that is the Equity Index, Growth Index, and Sustainability Index, can all be used in writing answers in the General Studies Paper 2 of the mains examination in the Governance section. So this is a kind of case study which can be used in your answers. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 14 talks about the performance of India's exports and imports in the past 4 to 5 months between April to October 2020 and 21. And these are based on the Engineering Export Promotion Council of India's observations. So according to the Engineering Export Promotion Council of India, exports during the April to October 2020 to 21 declined by 19% to $150 billion compared to the same period last year. So there is a fall of 19% compared to the same period last year. Further, the imports were at $182 billion, and these were 36% lower than the first 7 months of 2019 and 20. So in this regard, let us look at India's trade performance for the financial year of 2019 and 20, which will be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view under the topic economic development. However, before looking at the international trade of India, let us first try and understand how UPSC has been asking questions in the preliminary examination related to the external sector, which is an important part of economy syllabus from the preliminary examination point of view. Now, if you look at the previous year papers, you will find that these three questions were asked in the preliminary examination of 2019, and all these were related to the external sector or India's international trade. So the first question reads, consider the following statement. First is that most of India's external debt is owed by the government entities, and second is that all of India's external debt is denominated in US dollars. Now, if you closely look at these statements, you will find that the first statement given here is incorrect because most of India's external debt is owed by the private sector and not by government entities. And regarding the second statement, you can easily eliminate this statement because it obviously looks incorrect because all of India's external debt cannot be denominated in US dollars. So the correct answer is D, neither one nor two. Further, if you look at this question, it reads which one of the following is not the most likely measure the government or the RBI takes to stop the slide of Indian rupee. So in such kind of questions, you should be aware of the term not that is given in the question statement. So in this, the first statement reads curbing the imports of non-essential goods and promoting exports. Now, promotion of exports will lead to earning of foreign currency for India, and that will lead to appreciation of rupee. And also curbing imports will lead to appreciation of rupee, and that is why this is a likely measure that will be taken by the RBI in order to stop the slide of Indian currency. Second statement is that encouraging Indian borrowers to issue rupee dominated masala bonds, and this is also likely to help the appreciation of Indian rupee. Third is the easing conditions relating to the external commercial borrowing, and this will also help in appreciation of Indian rupee. So the only step which the government or the RBI is not likely to take is following an expansionary monetary, and that is why this is the only measure which the government is not likely to take, and hence all these statements are not relevant to the question that is asked, and the correct answer here is D, that is following an expansionary monetary policy. Third question is that in the context of India, which of the following factors is or are the contributor or contributors to reducing the risk of currency crisis? First is the foreign currency earnings of India's IT sector. So this will lead to increased foreign currency earning for India, and hence it will reduce the risk of a currency crisis in India, and hence it is a correct statement. If you look at the third statement, reads remittances from Indians abroad, and they are also foreign currency dominated, and as such they will also help in reducing the risk of currency crisis. However, the second statement, that is the increasing of the government expenditure, is unlikely to reduce the risk of a currency crisis, and that is because if the government starts spending more, it might lead to increased imports in India, and as such there will be more requirement of the foreign currency, and that actually increases the risk of a currency crisis. So the second statement is incorrect. So the correct answer that comes out is B, that is 1 and 3 only. Now, in the prelims of 2020, a question was again asked related to the international trade of India. And the statements given were first is India's merchandise exports are less than its merchandise imports. So, this is a well known fact that India relies more on merchandise imports, and hence this first statement given here is correct. Further, if you look at this third statement, it is also correct because India's export of services are more than its import of services, and that is because India is known to be exporting these services to the world. And second is that India suffers from an overall trade or current account deficit, which is also correct. So the correct answer that comes out is D, that is 1, 3 and 4 only. So by solving these questions, we find that the external sector and international trade and the currency crisis, these are all important topics for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So after this, let us look at some of the important aspects of international trade of India which have been highlighted by the Economic Survey. So in this, we'll be looking at the merchandise exports of India. So regarding the trends in the merchandise exports, between 2009 to 2014, the merchandise exports accounted for 16% of India's GDP. However, since then, the merchandise exports as a percentage of GDP has steadily declined to 11.3% of GDP in the first half of 2019 and 20. So this means that the share of merchandise exports in international trade has been declining as a percentage of GDP. Now, what are the top 5 export commodities that are exported from India? So these include the petroleum products, pearls, precious stones, drug formulations, gold jewelry, and iron and steel. Another important aspect is the top export destinations for India. So these include the USA, UAE, China, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And as far as the merchandise imports are concerned, between 2009 to 2014, the merchandise imports accounted for 24.3% of the GDP. However, since then, the merchandise imports as a percentage of GDP has steadily declined to 17.6% of the GDP in the first half of 2019 and 20. Now, what are the reasons for the decline in merchandise imports? Now, you might all be knowing that India is heavily dependent on the import of crude oil. And accordingly, a decline in the international crude oil prices has led to a decline in merchandise imports as a percentage of GDP. That is because crude oil accounts for 26% of India's imports. Secondly, we note that there has been slowdown in the Indian economy, and that has been because of declining demand. And as the demand has been declining and as there has been slowdown in the Indian economy, it has also led to decline in the imports. However, even then, the merchandise imports are more as compared to the merchandise exports. So this brings us to the top 5 import commodities for India. So first, as you might all be knowing, is crude oil. Second is gold. Third are the petroleum products. Then it's the pearl and the precious stones and coal and coke. And top 5 exporters to India, or top 5 countries from which India imports. The first one is China, and we note that the increasing trade deficit with China is one of the concerns for India. Second is the United States of America, then there is UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. And out of all these countries, India only has trade surplus with United States of America and the United Arab Emirates. So this is also one of the unique and important facts. So these are few aspects of the merchandise exports and merchandise imports from India. And these can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And with this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 7 is related to the issue of academic freedom in the Indian universities. And in this regard, this article highlights the recently released International Academic Freedom Index. And in this, India has scored considerably low as compared to other countries. So as you can see, the India's academic freedom score on this index is lower as compared to other countries. So in this article, let us try and understand what are the key indicators that are used in calculating the academic freedom index. And after that, we will look at performance of India and where did India fall short. Also, what are the factors that are hampering the academic freedom in India and how the National Education Policy of 2020 provides a hope for giving the academic freedom in India. And these can be very important aspects for us from General Studies Paper 2 point of view under the topic Education, which is a part of GS Paper 2. So let us look at these aspects in detail. Now, the Academic Freedom Index used the 8 components that are used to evaluate the scores and provide rankings to the countries regarding the academic freedom. First is the freedom that is available to research and teach in these universities. Second aspect is the freedom of academic exchange and dissemination. Third is institutional autonomy, campus integrity, freedom of academic and cultural expression, constitutional protection of academic freedom, and international legal commitment to academic freedom under the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and also existence of universities in these countries. Now, out of these parameters, India has not fared well on some of the indicators in this Academic Freedom Index. So let us look at these parameters. So out of the 8 parameters, India has not fared well on institutional autonomy, campus integrity, freedom of academic and cultural expression, and also constitutional protection of academic freedom. So now this takes us to the factors that are hampering the academic freedom in India. Now, as highlighted by this index that India has not fared well on some of the components like the institutional autonomy, campus integrity, etc., let us look at the factors that are hampering the academic freedom in India. And accordingly, it is highlighted that the government's interference in both academic and the non-academic issues is one of the factors that is leading to the hampering of academic freedom in India. Now, in this, there are various issues associated with the interference of the government in both academic as well as non-academic areas. First and foremost is the appointments of the higher officials in the universities. So, the top ranking posts like the vice chancellors, pro vice chancellors, and registrars, etc., are all politicized because these appointments are done by the government. And as these important positions in the universities are being politicized, they choke the academic and creative freedom. Further, such kind of politicization leads to corrupt practices, and these include corrupt practices in licensing and accreditation of the colleges that are accredited by the universities. Further, it leads to unhealthy favoritism and nepotism in staff appointments and also in the admissions of the students. And according to the report that has been cited by the Academic Freedoms Index, the political tensions in India may have something to do with the declining academic freedom. So these are some of the factors that have been hampering academic freedom in India according to the reports. So after this, let us look at how this National Education Policy of 2020 aims at providing the academic freedom to the Indian universities and the education system. Now, one of the key features of the national education policy is that it aims at overhauling the educational system in our country, and it aims at making India a global knowledge superpower. And this is to be done with a new system that is aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 4. Further, this new education policy claims that it is based on the principles of creativity, critical thinking, and also it aims at making an education system that is free from political and external interference. So, as we have learned that the political interference is one of the reasons for reduced academic freedom in the Indian universities, and accordingly, this new education system aims at reducing the political as well as external interference in the universities and education system in India. Further, this policy provides freedom to design the universities their own curricular and pedagogical approach within the approved framework. Also, freedom will be provided to design the textbooks, reading materials, selections, assignments, and the assessments procedure. The national education policy further aims at constituting a national research foundation, and this will be a merit based and peer reviewed research funding which will be governed independently of the government. That means this will also have no political interference. And this will consist of a board of governors which will include the best researchers and innovators across the fields. Further, we note that one of the issues in the functioning of the universities in India has been heavy bureaucratization of such institutions. And as such, the NEP aims to debureaucratize the education system by giving the governance powers to the academicians. So, this is a welcome step. Further, the new education policy also talks about giving autonomy to the higher education institutions by handing over their administration to a board comprising of academicians. So, this is a step again aimed at reducing the political interference as well as debureaucratization. However, in conclusion, the author is skeptical that whether these promises and offers that are being provided under the new education policy for reducing the political interference and promoting academic freedom will be put into practice or not. So, this is one of the concerns that has been raised by the author regarding the new education policy, which promises academic freedom. So, these are few points which can be important for us from exam point of view. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 10 is related to the Malabar exercise, and now this has started off the coast of Vizag or Vishakhapatnam. Now, this Malabar naval exercise has gained importance because Australia has also joined along with United States of America, Japan, and India. And these are the same members who are also the members of Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which is being seen as an anti-China grouping. And these four countries aim at increasing their influence in the Indo-Pacific region against the rise of China. And different aspects of the Malabar naval exercise have already been discussed in the Daily News Simplified of 31st October 2020. So do go through that and try and learn about the important facts from preliminary examination point of view. So with this we conclude the discussion, and these are the answers for the self-assessment test. And now let us take up the question for the day.